Our story begins with a man who, 10 years ago, stood at the pinnacle of power, commanding fleets and suppressing nations as a five-star general. We see the legendary Lin Feng, who once led the coalition to victory at Sakura Island, returning home to the kingdom of Jin as a god of war. Upon his return, 12 war gods knelt before him, offering the Jade Seal and pleading for him to lead the million-strong Silver Dragon army. However, he looked upon that supreme power with total indifference. From this day on, the world would have no war god, only an ordinary man named Lin Feng. His only wish now was to protect his parents and sister. As these thoughts settled, he took a single step forward, and the world seemed to bend to his will. In just a few breaths, he traveled 10,000 miles, crossing the distance in an instant. He soon found himself standing before a humble, simple house. Looking at the modest home, he felt a pang of sorrow. 10 years ago, while on his way to see his girlfriend, Chun Inua, an S-rank military order changed everything. He had been drafted so suddenly that he never even had the chance to say goodbye. Now, a decade later, he wondered if his family was even safe. As these memories swirled in his mind, he descended to the ground. Right then, the door of the small house was suddenly thrown open. Accompanied by a terrified cry, two fierce-looking men dragged a young girl outside. She begged them to stop, crying out that she had learned her lesson. The men told her to shut her mouth, but Lin Feng's expression shifted instantly. He recognized her. It was his sister, Xiaoyao. The realization that someone dared to bully his sister filled him with a cold fury. In a flash, he vanished, reappearing directly in front of the two men. He gave them exactly 3 seconds to get lost or face the consequences. The leader, a man with a scarred face, reacted with immediate hostility. He pulled a dagger from his waist, warning the young man not to meddle in business that didn't concern him. He didn't even finish his sentence. Lin Feng's hands moved like lightning, seizing both men before they could blink. They struggled, demanding to know if he knew who they were. They claimed to be with the Three-Mouth Gang, a name that meant nothing to him. With a cold snort, he sent a surge of spiritual energy through his grip. With a sudden burst of strength, he tossed them both nearly 20 meters away. If his sister hadn't been watching, he might have done much worse. He could have easily crushed their life force with his energy, but he decided that would be too merciful. After dealing with them, he turned to his sister. He rushed to her side, asking if she was all right. But Lin Yunyao stepped back warily, keeping a safe distance from this powerful stranger. She thanked him politely, calling him big brother out of respect, but her cautious eyes filled Lin Feng with a profound sense of sadness. A deep sadness rose from within him as he asked if she truly didn't recognize him, her own brother, Lin Feng. Lin Yunyao froze, searching her memories. As that face from her past slowly merged with the man standing before her, tears welled up in her eyes once more. She insisted he had the wrong person. Lin Feng stood there in shock, feeling as though his heart had been torn to pieces. He tried to ask what was wrong, but Yunyao cut him off. She screamed at him not to call her that, reminding him he was absent when their parents died, only returning now that the house was being demolished. She didn't want to assume the worst of him, but his timing was simply too disappointing. Lin Feng trembled, instinctively grabbing her shoulders. He demanded to know what she meant. How could their parents be gone? To his knowledge, they had always been in perfectly good health. At those words, Yunyao could no longer suppress her sobbing. She revealed they died a year after he vanished, having spent everything to find him. They were struck by a car while searching for him and passed away. She threw his hands off her, her voice turning ice cold. She mocked his appearance, asking if that woman, Chun Inua, had finally abandoned him, leaving him homeless and crawling back to his family. She called him a monster, but Lin Feng desperately tried to explain that there were reasons for his long absence, though he hesitated to continue. Military secrets cannot be leaked. After all, even though the borders were temporarily peaceful, if enemy nations knew he was gone, they would surely attack. Therefore, the news of his return had to remain a secret. But Yunyao didn't want to hear his nonsense and told him to get out. She declared that from the moment their parents died, she had no family left in this world. She vowed never to forgive him. The words hit him like a physical blow, leaving him paralyzed as he watched his sister run back into the small house and bolt the door. He stared blankly at the closed door, a profound sense of desolation washing over him. It took a long time for him to steady his emotions. He told her through the door that whether she believed him or not, he was back for good. He didn't care about the demolition money at all. She was his sister, and he promised that no one would ever bully her again. Even through the thick iron door, he could hear her muffled crying. He gently suggested she try to get some sleep, promising to stay right outside to guard her if she needed anything at all. After saying this, he found a flat corner in the courtyard to sit down and organize his thoughts. It was a lot to process, to be honest. Since his parents were gone, his only goals now were to protect his sister and focus on his cultivation. As for Chun Inua, well, that remained to be seen. As he sat there, we see him begin to drift back into his memories of Chun Inua, his girlfriend from years ago. They had been in love since high school and had dated for 7 long years. She had even promised to marry him, but fate had other plans. He let out a long, heavy sigh, followed by a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. It had been 10 years, and he felt he had failed Inua. By now, she likely had a family of her own, but if the chance ever arose, he vowed to make it up to her. Pushing these thoughts aside, he began to practice the 9 heavens immortal eye technique his master had taught him. His master had discovered this technique in a secret realm, but lacking the innate talent to master it herself, she had placed all her hopes on him instead. And he hadn't disappointed her. In just 10 years, he had surpassed her to become peerless in the world. The night passed in a flash while he was deep in meditation. When he finally opened his eyes, the door to the small house creaked open, and Lin Yunyao walked out carrying a basin of laundry. He immediately offered to help her wash the clothes, but Yunyao simply glared at him and told him to get lost. He didn't listen, of course, and grabbed the basin from her hands before heading toward the river. He told her there was no need for such formality between siblings, but as he knelt down, he noticed the clothes were worn thin and faded from years of scrubbing. His heart ached for her, and he told her to throw them away, promising new ones. Unexpectedly, Yunyao gave him a cold, piercing look and turned back toward the house, telling him she didn't need his hypocrisy. He could only offer a bitter smile. He quickly finished the laundry and hung it to dry, planning to head out and find a way to earn some money. However, at that very moment, a small pink car pulled up to the courtyard entrance. A fashionably dressed young woman stepped out, giving Lin Feng a strange, suspicious look, before ignoring him entirely and walking into the yard to call out for Yunyao. Hearing the voice, Yunyao rushed out to greet her friend, Li Xiaoke. Yunyao seemed relieved to see her, but Xiaoke immediately noticed her friend's red, swollen eyes and frowned with genuine concern. She asked why Yunyao had been crying, but Yunyao just shook her head and quickly pulled Xiaoke inside the house, leaving Lin Feng standing alone in the courtyard. He assumed the girl was Yunyao's friend, but just to be safe, he decided to use his heightened senses to listen in. Inside the room, Xiaoke glanced back toward the door and asked who that wretched-looking man outside was, noting that he didn't look like a good person at all. Yunyao simply shook her head, claiming she didn't know him and that he was probably just some homeless man looking for a meal. He heard every single word, of course, and wondered if he really looked that pathetic. Inside, it seemed Yunyao didn't want to discuss him further. Instead of discussing him further, Yunyao cut straight to the point, asking Xiaoke why she had come by today. Xiaoke suddenly remembered her purpose. She realized that school had already been in session for a month and asked why Yunyao hadn't attended. She suspected it was because of the tuition fees. Yunyao hesitated, turning her gaze away from Xiaoke. She quietly admitted that she was actually planning to go out and find a job instead. She told herself that entering society early was a good thing, as it would provide work experience. But Xiaoke insisted that quitting wasn't an option. Xiaoke suggested applying for a student loan, arguing that Yunyao shouldn't give up on Jinling University. Yunyao could only offer a bitter, hollow laugh. It was useless. Those people were intentionally sabotaging her to force her to sell the house cheaply. Her poverty certification materials were constantly being rejected. Hearing this, Xiaoke gritted her teeth in anger at the injustice. She told Yunyao not to worry and promised to help her friend. She planned to ask the counselor to start a fundraiser to ensure Yunyao could enroll. However, Yunyao simply shook her head and declined. She told Xiaoke that finding a job was fine and promised to treat her to dinner once she got paid. At this point, Lin Feng could no longer listen in silence. He pushed the door open, unable to accept that he, a peerless god of war, had a sister who couldn't even afford an education. If he hadn't overheard their conversation, he never would have known how much she was suffering in secret. In that moment, he felt a cold, sharp rage. He wanted to tear those who bullied her apart. He told her she must go to school, promising that he would handle the money himself. Xiaoke, seeing him burst in, immediately shielded Yunyao. She called him a lunatic and reminded him that trespassing was a crime. She ordered him to get out or she would call the police. However, he ignored her entirely, his mind set on a single goal. He told Yunyao that whether she accepted him or not, her education was non-negotiable. Having said his piece, he turned and left the house. We see him head toward the Jinling city center, pondering how to earn money. Though he had once possessed endless wealth, things were different now. Before returning, he had resigned his position as the god of war to live as an ordinary man, leaving his fortune to the soldiers at the border. He was currently broke, but for a man of his talents, earning money was hardly a challenge. Whether it was medicine or ancient arts, he was a master. After a moment of thought, he arrived at the Jiangning General Trading Market in the north of the city. It was a place where anything could be bought. As we know, such markets are often lawless zones where all sorts of people gather. As he stepped into the bustling market, he found a random spot and wrote a few words on the stone pavement. For hire, 2 hours, capable of anything. He claimed to know everything and offered his services for free, then sat down to wait for someone destined to find him. Because his sign was so bold, many pedestrians gathered around to watch, some even mocking him with ridiculous questions. They asked if he could cure certain ailments or perform physical miracles, but Lin Feng naturally ignored their taunts. Just then, a gruff voice reached his ears, suggesting that he looked far too young and was clearly just bragging. The voice urged their leader to move on, fearing they were wasting time while their construction site faced a major crisis. Finding a true master of the supernatural wasn't easy, but hearing this, Lin Feng looked toward the source of the sound. He saw a group of people in a nearby Hummer watching him. Sensing an opportunity, he raised his voice and shouted. He proclaimed himself a master of exorcism, promising to clear any home of dark spirits. After shouting, he began to pack up. He prepared to leave, but before he could take 2 steps, a middle-aged man rushed from the vehicle to stop him. The man asked him to wait. Lin Feng smiled slightly and stopped, taking a moment to observe the stranger's impressive aura. The man commanded respect without even trying, suggesting he was either a powerful figure or someone from the underworld. Using his spiritual vision, Lin Feng saw the world turn white, revealing a cluster of dark energy on the man's forehead. Despite his strong vitality, a sinister aura lingered between his brows. He was clearly being haunted by something foul. The man introduced himself as Wang Chong, but Lin Feng cut him off, stating that his time was limited and he should get to the point. Wang Chong gave him a long look before explaining that strange, sinister things had been happening at his construction site lately. The workers claimed to hear children crying in the middle of the night, and just last night, things took a turn for the worse. Someone encountered a spirit while out at night and fell gravely ill, a sickness that left even the doctors baffled. Lin Feng already had a good idea of what was happening. Even in this modern age, traces of spiritual energy still linger. Such energy can give birth to mountain spirits and monsters, and it seemed a certain weasel had gained a dangerous intelligence. It seemed a creature was using dark arts to extend its own life. Lin Feng looked at the man and warned him that this wasn't as simple as he thought. If not handled correctly, his construction site and his own life would be at risk. He asked if the man had been sleeping poorly lately, which startled Wang Chong. The man was genuinely shocked that Lin Feng had guessed correctly. He admitted that every time he tried to sleep at night, he felt a presence. He felt as though a pair of eyes were constantly watching him, yet whenever he turned on the lights, there was nothing there. He told Lin Feng to name his price. As long as the problem was solved, money was no object. Lin Feng didn't hold back, asking for 100,000 yuan to settle the matter. Wang Chong narrowed his eyes slightly. To a man of his stature, that amount was nothing, provided the young man could actually deliver on his promise. If it worked, everyone would be happy. But he warned Lin Feng that if this was a scam, crushing someone like him would be as easy as killing an ant. Lin Feng merely gave a disdainful smile. He assured the man he wasn't lying, adding, with a touch of arrogance, that even if he were, Wang Chong couldn't stop him. Wang Chong laughed at the bold claim and invited him to the site. However, Lin Feng simply shook his head, much to the man's confusion. Instead, he went to a nearby market to buy ink and paper. After scribbling a few quick characters, he handed the sheet over to Wang Chong. The businessman took the paper, which looked like nothing more than messy scribbles, and his expression darkened as he looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng explained this wasn't ordinary paper. It was a talisman written with spiritual energy. Unless that weasel was a fool, it would flee upon seeing it. Wang Chong strongly suspected he was being swindled, yet seeing Lin Feng's dead serious expression, he found himself wavering in his disbelief. He decided to trust him just this once, but added a dark threat. If he was being lied to, he promised Lin Feng's entire family would pay the price. At those words, Lin Feng's gaze turned icy. The temperature around them seemed to drop to zero in an instant as he looked at the man. He told Wang Chong to repeat his last sentence. Facing that terrifying stare, the older man felt his hair stand on end, as if death were looming over him. He didn't understand why he was so afraid of a young man, but his instincts told him to back down immediately or face dire consequences. Those instincts had saved his life countless times before, so he quickly waved his hands, urging the young master to calm down and take back the threat. Lin Feng withdrew his killing intent but kept his voice cold. He warned the man to watch his tongue before demanding the full payment of 100,000 yuan. Relieved the tension had broken, Wang Chong breathed a sigh of relief and signaled his driver to bring over a suitcase filled with cash. The driver opened the case and handed over 100,000 yuan in cash. Lin Feng took the money, but then paused and pulled out his pen again. He suggested that one talisman might not be enough and offered to draw 2 more. Wang Chong's face twitched. No, he certainly didn't need any more. The businessman insisted one was plenty. In his mind, paying 10,000 for a single piece of scribbled paper was already madness. He wasn't about to buy more. Lin Feng simply turned to leave, warning the man not to regret it later, as the price would surely go up next time. Our story then moves away from the market. As he walked toward a nearby shopping street, Lin Feng's sharp senses picked up on something. Someone had been following him since he left. He assumed they were Wang Chong's men, but he wasn't particularly bothered. He was quite satisfied with the deal, as the money would finally cover his sister's tuition. After buying his sister new clothes and a phone, he led his pursuers into a narrow alleyway. And then, right before their eyes, he did something impossible. He simply rose into the air and vanished into the sky. Behind him, the tracker rubbed his eyes in disbelief, certain he must be hallucinating. When he realized Lin Feng had truly flown away, the man collapsed to the ground in terror. Trembling, he fumbled for his phone to call Wang Chong. He stammered into the receiver that he had lost the target, or rather, that the target wasn't human at all, because he had just flown away. On the other end of the line, Wang Chong was standing at his massive construction site. He lowered the phone, his expression shifting between doubt and confusion. He told himself that people simply don't fly. It was nonsense. Just then, his site manager approached him with a skeptical look on his face. The manager asked if that messy scrap of paper could really work, noting it looked no better than his primary school son's doodles. Wang Chong glared at him coldly. He snapped that since he'd already paid for it, it had better work. But just as the words left his mouth, a sudden crack of thunder echoed behind him. He spun around in terror and saw the doodle glowing with a fierce purple light. Beneath the paper, the charred corpse of a weasel suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Witnessing this, Wang Chong was overcome with excitement. He realized he had actually encountered a true master of the arts. He immediately began barking orders at his subordinates to track down the young man's whereabouts at any cost. Meanwhile, miles away, the consequences were felt elsewhere. At the exact moment the weasel died, a white-haired old man in a distant cave suddenly coughed up a mouthful of fresh blood. He cried out for his Huang Huang, demanding to know who dared to harm his creature. Wiping the blood from his lips, his face twisted into a mask of pure rage. The old man began sprinting toward the construction site. At the same time, Lin Feng landed a safe distance from his home, carrying his shopping bags to avoid unwanted attention. He prepared to walk the rest of the way home, but after only a few steps, a low, ominous roar echoed from the direction of his house. His expression shifted instantly. Lin Feng immediately activated his innate spirit eye, and in a flash, the scene at his small house was laid bare before him. We see that in the small courtyard, 2 excavators were idling while a dozen thugs surrounded Lin Yunyao and Li Xiaoka. They were shouting all sorts of vile and filthy insults at the girls. The air was thick with tension as the men continued their verbal assault, showing no signs of stopping. Faced with the predatory glares of these men, Lin Yunyao closed her eyes in utter despair, feeling completely helpless. Li Xiaoka shook her head firmly and shielded Yunyao behind her. In the crowd, the leader, a man known as Brother Ji, stepped forward. Licking his lips, he ordered 2 men to tie the girls up and throw them in the car, while the rest were told to tear the house down. To be honest, he was far too confident. 2 lackeys approached the girls with wicked grins. Watching this from afar, Lin Feng felt his blood begin to boil with a cold, surging fury. The killing intent radiating from him was so intense it seemed to darken the very sky. He told himself it was fine. If they wanted to find him, he would gladly answer. There are lines one simply does not cross, and threatening his sister was a death sentence. With a single step, the space around him seemed to contract. He appeared in the courtyard in an instant, his voice sounding like a freezing wind from the depths of an abyss. It was a cold, detached warning. After a brief moment of stunned silence, the thug snapped out of it and began mocking him, asking if he was insane for trying to interfere. They told him to get lost, but Lin Feng simply walked up to the 2 lackeys without a word. His hands shot out like lightning, grabbing them both by the throat. The crowd watched in total shock as he lifted 2 grown men, each weighing nearly 200 pounds, into the air with his bare hands. With a casual toss, he sent them flying over 10 meters through the air. It was a display of strength that defied all logic, really. Whether they were still alive was anyone's guess. Lin Feng then turned his icy gaze toward Brother Ji, who was standing nearby. Brother Ji narrowed his eyes, sensing a flicker of danger, but he felt safe enough behind his small army of men. He assumed numbers would win the day. He barked at Lin Feng, asking if he had a death wish for interfering with the business of the Senko Hall, which, naturally, was a very poor choice of words. Hearing that name again didn't provoke a reaction from Lin Feng, but Li Xiaoka and Lin Yunyao both turned pale with fear. Yunyao reached out with trembling hands. She tapped Lin Feng's shoulder and whispered for him to stop, mentioning that Tan Ziming, the student council president at Jinling University, was part of Senko Hall. She explained that Tan Ziming was the son of a high-ranking hall master, a man so powerful that even city officials bowed their heads and called him Young Master Tan. Lin Feng turned back to look at his sister in surprise. This was the first time she had spoken to him of her own accord, and though she didn't call him brother yet, her tone was clearly filled with concern. As for the Senko Hall, he decided he would simply find some time later to wipe them out. Meanwhile, hearing Yunyao's words, Brother Ji's arrogance only grew. He sneered, asking if they really thought it was over after his men were beaten so badly, demanding $1 million in medical fees. Lin Feng let out a cold laugh. It was indeed not over, because for those who dared to bully his sister, there was only one possible ending. The moment those words left his lips, he lunged forward like a sharpened blade. Brother Ji dismissively waved his hand, signaling his dozen lackeys to attack. The thugs drew their steel blades and rushed him, but in a matter of seconds, every single one of them lay on the ground with shattered bones. Brother Ji stood there, completely stunned by the display. Such combat power was rare, even within the Senko Hall. Before he could even process the shock, Lin Feng was already standing directly in front of him. "Your turn," he said. The thug trembled so violently, he collapsed onto the ground in terror. He begged for mercy, claiming he never would have touched the house if he'd known how strong Lin Feng was. But at that moment, a sudden cry came from behind. Yunyao screamed for Lin Feng to watch out. He looked up to see the massive metal bucket of an excavator swinging directly toward his head. And yet, we see him simply reach out a single hand, stopping the massive machine dead in its tracks. He then turned his gaze toward the terrified driver. "Is this fun?" he asked. The driver burst into tears, sobbing that he didn't want to play anymore and just wanted to go home. Lin Feng tilted his head. "Fine," he replied. "I'll send you home." With a casual flick of a small pebble, he shattered the driver's internal life force in an instant. Having finished that, he turned and sent Brother G flying with a single kick, telling him to take his people and get lost immediately. Brother G couldn't believe he was being let go and scrambled to flee with his men. They had no idea, of course, that he was only acting for Yunyao's sake. He had already dealt them a fatal blow. By tomorrow, they would all be dead. After this rescue, he felt his sister's attitude toward him softened significantly. Not only did she accept his gift, but she even invited him to stay for dinner. Later that evening, after the meal, Li Xiaoka drove away from the small house. This left only the two of them alone in the quiet room. As Lin Feng began to clear the table, he noticed his sister watching him intently. Perhaps she still found it difficult to truly accept him. Realizing this, he gave her a reassuring smile and told her not to worry, for he would wait. He promised to wash the dishes and leave, assuring her he wouldn't stay the night without permission. However, Yunyao simply shook her head, reminding him that this was his home too. She told him there was no need to go. Lin Feng, she began. 10 years ago you said you were going to find your girlfriend and then you never returned. What really happened? Hearing this, he gently set down the dishes, his eyes filled with a complex swirl of emotions. I'm sorry, Yunyao, he whispered. I truly had no choice in the matter. He insisted he had never abandoned them for a woman, but Yunyao's eyes were filled with disappointment. She wondered if he really intended to keep the truth hidden even from her. In the next moment, a ball of deep blue spiritual fire flickered into existence within his palm. Seeing this, Yunyao's eyes widened in absolute shock. She could hardly believe what she saw. This was spiritual fire, with a core temperature of thousands of degrees, capable of incinerating almost anything on Earth. To be honest, it was a sight no ordinary person could process. He told her how sorry he was for what she and their parents had endured, promising that no matter how much she resented him, he would never be angry. But this time, he had returned with a vow. He swore to protect her for the rest of her life. At those words, Yunyao suddenly covered her mouth, the grievances she had suppressed for years finally breaking through. Brother, she sobbed. She told him to say no more. We see that witnessing such a supernatural display had placed an immense amount of pressure on her heart, and she had reached her limit. Deep down, she was simply looking for a reason to forgive him, any reason at all, no matter how impossible it seemed to the rational mind. Regardless of how absurd the explanation was, he felt his voice tremble as he reached out to hold her shoulders. Yunyao, he asked, what did you just call me? In response, she threw herself into his arms and began to wail. She apologized through her tears, calling herself willful and unreasonable, and begged for his forgiveness. He gently patted her back, his gaze softening with pure affection. It wasn't until late into the night that her sobbing finally ceased, and she drifted off into a deep sleep. He carefully tucked her into bed and stepped outside alone. After his sister's earlier question, memories he had tried to bury began to resurface in his mind once again. The image of Chun Inua filled his thoughts. Eventually, he took out his new phone and logged into his old messaging account. Immediately, a massive flood of notifications began to pop up. Most were messages from friends 10 years ago, asking where he had gone. But there were many from Chun Inua as well, asking if he was still coming to marry her. She had begged him to come, warning that her father would marry her off to someone else if he didn't show up. She pleaded with him not to ignore her messages, her desperation clear. The most recent message was from 3 years ago. It simply said, Lin Feng, I truly regret ever knowing you. Seeing those words, he felt a sharp, stabbing pain in his chest. He wanted to reply, yet he found himself frozen, not daring to move his hand. After taking a moment to compose himself, he clicked on her social media profile to see her life. There were many photos of her, but even more of her with a beautiful little girl. It seemed, quite naturally, that she had already moved on and married someone else. He realized that even if he wanted to turn back time, he couldn't. Deep down, he knew that a future between them was impossible now. Still, he planned to settle Yunyao's schooling first, then leave Inoa a sum of money to compensate for the 10 years he was gone. The next morning, Li Xiaoka arrived to drive them to Jinling University. After they arrived, she took Yunyao to handle the enrollment paperwork. While they were busy, Lin Feng began to wander around the campus. He had graduated from this very school 10 years ago, and now, a decade later, he found that the place hadn't changed a bit. It was as if time had stood still while he was away. As he walked, he followed a familiar voice and spotted an old classmate, Yin Jingqiu. Though they hadn't been close, and had even clashed, seeing her after 10 years brought a wave of nostalgia. A small smile played on his lips as he greeted his old classmate. Yin Jingqiu had clearly done well for herself, sporting a heavy gold watch on her wrist and looking every bit the successful professional. She walked up to him, scanning him from head to toe with a smirk. Lin Feng, she asked, where have you been making your fortune? She noted that he had missed several class reunions. He noticed the playful, slightly mocking glint in her eyes, but he didn't let it bother him. He simply told her his life had been nothing special. Hearing this, Jingqiu patted his shoulder with an air of superiority. She told him to reach out if he needed help, mentioning she ran a listed company and could easily find him a job as a security guard. She even offered him $3,000 a month. He calmly shook his head, thanking her, but explaining he didn't need it for now. Seeing his firm refusal, Jingqiu actually stepped forward and threw an arm around his shoulder. She told him he had no idea how tough the job market was. She claimed that even for a security position, she wouldn't even look at an applicant who didn't have a master's degree. She insisted she was only making an exception because of their history, asking him one more time if he really wouldn't consider it. He glanced at her hand on his shoulder, his expression turning cold. Just then, her phone rang, breaking the awkward tension. It was Vice Principal Wang. She told him she had arrived at the school and knew a great place where she could host him for lunch. After hanging up, she gave Lin Feng a fake, apologetic smile. She told him she had a lunch date with Vice Principal Wang Tiangao. She told him to think about the job offer and reach out whenever he was ready. And with that, she turned to leave. She simply opened the door of a nearby Bentley and drove away. Lin Feng didn't pay much mind to the encounter, continuing his stroll until noon. That's when Lin Yunyao called him. "Brother, my enrollment is all set. Let's go eat." Hearing his sister's joyful tone, Lin Feng couldn't help but smile. He told her he'd wait for them at the Chuanxiang Pavilion nearby. After arriving at the restaurant, Yunyao affectionately grabbed his arm, asking why he chose this place. She had heard the average bill here was over 1,000 yuan. He gently patted her head, telling her it didn't matter. Since it was her first day, they had to eat something special. He assured her he had the money. Once inside, a hostess led our group to a table in the main hall. Lin Feng handed the menu to Yunyao and Li Xiaoke, telling them to order whatever they liked without looking at the prices. Just then, a noisy chatter drifted in from the entrance. Looking over, we see several Jinling University officials arriving alongside none other than Yun Jingqiu. Jingqiu spotted him immediately, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Lin Feng, what a coincidence," she remarked. "Meeting again so soon." She walked over and asked if he had considered the job offer she mentioned that morning. As she approached, she noticed Yunyao and Xiaoke, and for a brief moment, a flicker of greed or perhaps envy flashed in her eyes as she looked at the two women. However, she didn't dwell on it. In her mind, she and Lin Feng were worlds apart, belonging to entirely different social classes. One of the school officials stepped forward, asking if this was an acquaintance. Jingqiu smiled, her tone laced with a bit of mockery. She introduced him to Vice Principal Wang, explaining that Lin Feng was an old classmate and had once been the most handsome guy on campus. Hearing this, Wang Tiangao gave him a second look and warmly invited him to join them, since he was also an alumnus of the school. Jingqiu's lips curled into a smirk. She was back at the school today as a distinguished alumna and a donor, after all. If Lin Feng agreed to join them, she felt it would only highlight the massive gap that now existed between their lives. Lin Feng simply replied that it wasn't convenient. Jingqiu shifted her gaze back to the two women, insisting that his friends were welcome too. She claimed she wanted to get to know the two beauties. As soon as those words left her mouth, Lin Feng's gaze turned ice cold. He repeated that it wasn't convenient, asking if she hadn't heard him. Jingqiu narrowed her eyes, clearly surprised he would dare speak to her like that. However, she didn't get angry. Instead, she put on a look of mock apology, telling Lin Feng she understood his struggle. She claimed seeing her success must make him feel unbalanced, but as an old classmate, she truly wanted to help him. She asked if he'd really deny her this small favor, but Lin Feng only felt a wave of disgust and told her to get lost. Jingqiu's expression darkened instantly at his lack of tact. She leaned in and whispered that she'd seen Chun Inua recently. She taunted him to guess how Inua was doing. Lin Feng felt a jolt of alarm, demanding to know what had happened. Jingqiu smiled and patted his shoulder, saying she'd tell him if he joined her for dinner. Yunyao gripped his hand in worry. He gave his sister a reassuring look before turning back to Jingqiu, agreeing to the meal just to get the information. With his agreement, Jingqiu led our group to a top-floor private suite, immediately assuming the role of the grand host. As the meal began, the school officials showered her with flattery. Through their chatter, we learned something quite interesting. Jinling University was building a new independent college, but they were short 30 million yuan to finish the project. They hoped Jingqiu would sponsor the rest. She simply shook her head with a dismissive air, as if the amount were trivial. To her, 30 million was barely worth mentioning. After all, she felt it was her duty to contribute to her alma mater. She shot a subtle, mocking glance at Lin Feng, clearly relishing the moment. To be honest, her arrogance was showing. She wanted him to see the gap between them. She could drop millions while he likely struggled to find 3,000. While the others chatted happily, Wang Tiangao suddenly turned a sharp, critical gaze toward Lin Feng. He praised Jingqiu's success, contrasting it with certain people who had no talent but plenty of attitude. Wang claimed he despised useless people who acted tough. It was a blatant insult, and Yunyao couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up immediately, demanding to know why he was speaking to her brother that way. Wang Tiangao merely snorted. He noted she was a new student and threatened that if she didn't learn her place, he could end her education right now. At those words, Lin Feng's eyes turned deathly cold. For a second, Wang felt as if he were being stared down by a demon. He reminded himself that as the vice president of Jinling University, there was no reason to fear a nobody, so he let out a cold sneer. Lin Feng stood up with a completely expressionless face and a calm voice, stating that he had sworn upon his return that no one would bully his sister. He offered Wang a single chance to make amends, apologize to his sister, and he might consider letting the matter go. Wang Tiangao's face twisted in mockery at the idea of apologizing to a little girl, but Lin Feng's expression remained terrifyingly still. The icy aura radiating from him made the entire private suite feel suffocating. While nearby, Jingchu watched the drama unfold with a smirk. She realized this was her moment to step in. By resolving the deadlock, she could show off her influence and make Lin Feng feel eternally grateful. With that plan in mind, she walked over and patted Lin Feng's shoulder, asking everyone to give her some face and drop the argument. She suggested to Vice President Wang that they let it slide, claiming that since Lin Feng was her classmate, his sister was like her own. Wang Tiangao shrugged indifferently, agreeing to forgive them only because Director Jingchu had personally intervened. The other officials nodded in admiration of Jingchu's grace, and one even stepped forward to tell Lin Feng he should be thanking her. Jingchu simply smiled, playing the part of the humble benefactor by saying there was no need for thanks between the two of them. After saying this, she kept her eyes fixed on him, clearly waiting for the moment he would finally bow his head in gratitude. Instead, Lin Feng stared directly at Wang Tiangao, giving him 10 final seconds to apologize or he wouldn't be leaving the room. The room fell into a stunned silence after a sudden, sharp movement left Jingchu clutching her face in utter disbelief. She screamed, asking what he thought he was doing hitting her after she had spoken up for him, but Lin Feng simply ignored her and began his countdown. Just as he was about to reach one, Wang Tiangao suddenly blurted out an apology to the young girl for his earlier rudeness. Cold sweat began to bead on the vice president's forehead. The pressure was so intense he felt he might actually die if he didn't comply. Lin Feng gave him a chilling look, accepting the apology, but warning him that this incident must not lead to his sister's expulsion. To emphasize his point, he picked up a glass from the table and, with a light squeeze, crushed it into fine powder. Wang Tiangao nodded frantically in fear, and then Lin Feng turned his cold, steady gaze back toward a fuming Jingchu. Lin Feng turned to Jingchu, his voice cold as he warned her that his patience was wearing thin. For the sake of their past, he offered to forget everything if she told him about Chininua. Jingchu's anger boiled over into a sharp, mocking laugh. She looked at Lin Feng, genuinely baffled by where he found the courage to speak to her in such a tone. With a sharp clap of her hands, 8 bodyguards in black suits stormed into the room. Leading them was a bald man who stood nearly 2 meters tall, looking quite formidable. A jagged scar, resembling a centipede, crawled across the man's face. His mere presence radiated a heavy, suffocating pressure that made it difficult for anyone in the room to breathe. The guests watched in shock, their whispers filling the air as they recognized the giant. It seems our crowd has spotted a local celebrity, and not the friendly kind. One guest pointed out that the leader was Zhao Hu, a man famous on television for winning 80 consecutive underground fights. But his reputation went far beyond simple boxing. He was rumored to be a yellow-rank martial artist. For those unaware, a martial artist is someone who has cultivated internal energy to reach a level far beyond ordinary humans. Jingchu pointed at Lin Feng, telling Zhao Hu that the boy had dared to slap her. Zhao Hu cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing like dry wood snapping in the silence. He suggested breaking 3 of the boy's limbs first, then letting him decide how to apologize. Jingchu laughed, telling him to proceed exactly as he had described. But before she could even finish her sentence, Lin Feng moved with a speed that defied the eye. In an instant, he had gripped her head and slammed it against the wall. The force was so immense that spiderweb cracks bloomed across the masonry. He looked at her as if she were a mere insect, a creature far too bold for its own good. A collective gasp filled the room as the 8 bodyguards rushed forward to surround him. Zhao Hu adjusted his neck, his gaze turning predatory and dangerous. He realized Lin Feng was also a yellow-rank martial artist, but he dismissed him as an arrogant amateur who didn't know the true heights of the world. Zhao Hu boasted that as a late-stage yellow-rank expert, he wouldn't need more than 10 moves to finish him. Lin Feng simply released his grip on Jingchu, his eyes full of disdain. With a casual flick of his foot, he kicked Jingchu across the floor until she landed at Zhao Hu's feet. She coughed up a mouthful of blood, her face contorted in agony. Her eyes were now filled with a murderous rage as she screamed for Lin Feng's death. She demanded to know why she was paying her men if they were just going to stand there. At her command, 7 of the bodyguards lunged at once. However, Lin Feng moved with a calm, effortless grace, dodging their strikes as if he were merely taking a stroll. In just a few seconds, the room was filled with the sound of shattering bones as everyone was neutralized. Jingchu watched in horror, calling them all useless trash. She reminded Zhao Hu that she paid him 2 million a year to handle threats like this. Zhao Hu didn't wait for her to finish. He lunged forward, throwing a heavy punch at Lin Feng's face. To the absolute shock of everyone watching, Lin Feng simply raised a single hand. He caught Zhao Hu's massive fist in his palm, holding it as easily as if it were a child's toy. No matter how hard he struggled, Zhao Hu couldn't pull his fist away. It seems a $2 million bodyguard isn't quite what he used to be, and the room fell into a sudden, heavy silence. Everyone watched the scene with dull, disbelieving eyes. Lin Feng's lips curled into a faint, cold smile as he lightly tapped his finger against the giant's chest. A thin line of blood sprayed out instantly, revealing a finger-sized hole torn right through Zhao Hu's chest. Jingchu let out a low, furious growl, unable to accept what she was seeing. She screamed that it was impossible, accusing Lin Feng of using some dirty, underhanded trick. To her, there was no other way he could have defeated a man like Zhao Hu. Looking at her distorted, frantic face, Lin Feng felt a wave of boredom wash over him. He told her he had no time to waste and demanded she tell him about Qininhua. Jingchu seemed to think she had finally found his weakness. She taunted him, asking if he was brave enough to let her make one single phone call in exchange for the information. She promised that if he survived what came next, she would tell him everything. Hearing this, Lin Feng simply sat down with a calm, almost indifferent composure. He agreed, but warned her that this was her final chance. If she hesitated again, he promised she wouldn't even have a whole corpse left to bury. Jingchu's blood boiled at his arrogant tone, realizing he didn't view her as a threat at all. She snapped, telling him that being a good fighter wouldn't save him from the world's true power. She vowed to show him the vast gap that existed between their social standings. Without another word, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The call was answered quickly, and a deep, magnetic voice echoed from the other end, asking who was calling. Jingchu's demeanor shifted instantly. She flashed a sycophantic smile, her voice dripping with flattery as she introduced herself to Chairman Wang. She reminded him of their previous dinner together, acting like a loyal subordinate. The guests were stunned by this display of submission. In Jinling City, Jingchu was a woman of significant status, yet here she was, bowing her head over a phone call. The identity of the man on the other end must have been truly staggering to command such respect. Chairman Wang remained silent for a moment before finally speaking. He recalled her as the director in charge of the Jinling University branch construction project. He asked, quite bluntly, what business she had with him. Seeing that he remembered her, Jingchu's face lit up with excitement. She told him he could simply call her Little Yun, showing just how much she craved his favor. She began to explain the situation at the restaurant, hoping this powerful figure would step in to solve her little problem with Lin Feng. Chairman Wang responded quickly, noting he was actually nearby and would arrive in 20 minutes. With that, the line went dead, leaving no room for further talk. Jingchu was overcome with joy. She had expected him to send a few men, not to come personally. In Jinling, very few people could move Chairman Wang to act in person. And that brings us to the arrival of Wang Tiangao, a man whose presence was about to change the temperature of the room entirely. With a solemn expression, one of the guests patted her shoulder and asked, with a hint of hesitation, if the Chairman Wang she mentioned was indeed Wang Tiangao. It seemed he barely dared to speak the name aloud. Jingchu composed herself instantly and confirmed that it was indeed the head of the Azure Dragon Construction Group. Upon hearing this, everyone was utterly shocked. The Azure Dragon Group is a massive conglomerate worth over 100 billion, a true titan in Jinling City's construction industry. Its chairman, Wang Chong, also known as Wang Tiangao, is rumored to be the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang, one of the city's 3 major underworld factions. It's said that when Chairman Wang stomps his foot, all of Jinling City trembles. Jingchu turned to Lin Feng with a smug look, clearly enjoying her moment of triumph. She explained that the contractor for the Jinling branch project was Tianhong Engineering, a company controlled by Chairman Wang himself. During a recent site inspection, she happened to run into him. Not only did they have a pleasant conversation, but they even shared a meal together. The way the guests looked at Jingchu changed completely. They never imagined her connections were so powerful that she could associate with a giant of Jinling City. Even the older guests began to approach her with newfound respect, calling her a phoenix among men and asking her to look after them in the future. Jingchu waved her hand generously, telling them not to worry. She claimed she was the type of person who never forgets those who helped her along the way. The smiles in the room grew even wider at her words. However, listening to all of this, Lin Yunyao couldn't help but feel a deep sense of dread. She whispered to her brother, suggesting they should leave immediately, fearing that Chairman Wang was someone they simply couldn't afford to provoke. Lin Feng simply smiled and shook his head to reassure her. He told Yunyao to take little Ku and leave first, insisting that he would be perfectly fine. Yunyao hesitated, but eventually nodded. She realized that staying would only cause more trouble, and the best thing she could do was get out of the way. About 20 minutes passed before the sound of heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoed from outside the private room. Everyone tensed up and hurriedly stood to their feet. The door was pushed open, and a middle-aged man dressed in black walked in, followed by a disciplined row of bodyguards in sharp suits. Each man carried a cold, murderous aura, as if they had just stepped off a battlefield. It was enough to make anyone's heart skip a beat in fear. But when Lin Feng saw the newcomer, he paused in surprise. It turned out the big shot Jingchu had summoned was none other than Wang Chong. Wang Chong scanned the room and immediately locked eyes with Jingchu. His voice was laced with irritation as he demanded to know who was causing her trouble. We should note that while his recent construction site issues were resolved, he still hadn't found the mysterious master who helped him, and now he faced a new problem. His current problems desperately required the help of a master, leaving him incredibly frustrated. That was the only reason he had agreed to come today. He hoped to vent his anger by teaching some fool a lesson. Jingchu greeted him with a fawning smile, her heart practically dancing with joy. To her, the worse Wang Chang's temper was, the more miserable Lin Feng's end would be. She immediately pointed a finger at him, identifying the target. Wang Chong followed her gaze, and his expression froze for a split second before a wave of pure ecstasy washed over him. It was a stroke of luck. As the saying goes, he had searched far and wide only to find the master right here. He began to speak, but Lin Feng stopped him. With a subtle shake of his head, Lin Feng silenced him. Wang Chong understood the hint instantly and turned his gaze back toward Jingqiu. He asked her if this was indeed the person she wanted to punish and how she wanted it handled. Jingqiu couldn't help but let out a mocking sneer. She claimed the boy didn't know his place and had dared to strike her, so she wanted him to suffer a slow, agonizing death. With a hideous expression, she looked at Lin Feng and told him this was the price of opposing her, promising to care for his sister later. She demanded that Wang Chong break all his limbs so he would regret ever crossing her. However, before she could even finish her sentence, Wang Chong swung his hand and delivered a brutal slap to Jingqiu's face, sending stars dancing before her eyes as she collapsed to the floor. This sudden turn of events left everyone in the room utterly bewildered. The other guests watched with their mouths hanging open in shock. Jingqiu sat on the ground, completely lost, stammering that the chairman must have hit the wrong person. But before she could react further, Wang Chong delivered a sharp kick to her stomach, shouting that she was the one he intended to hit for daring to trouble a master. Enduring the sharp pain, Jingqiu looked at Lin Feng in total confusion, insisting he was just a poor nobody and couldn't possibly be a master. She claimed the chairman must have been deceived. Wang Chong's face grew so dark with rage it looked as though it might start dripping. He told her to shut up, threatening to ruin her if she said another word. Jingqiu stared with wide eyes, kneeling on the floor and muttering in disbelief. Wang Chong didn't waste any more breath on her. Instead, under the stunned gazes of everyone present, he turned toward Lin Feng. He dropped to his knees before the young man, exclaiming with relief that he had finally found the master he was looking for. The onlookers, fearing they might be caught in the crossfire, quickly fled the room. Soon, only Lin Feng, Wang Chong, and Jingqiu remained. We see Lin Feng glance indifferently at Jingqiu before stepping forward and calmly resting his foot on the man's arm, applying just a hint of pressure. The sound of bones snapping echoed instantly. Jingqiu snapped back to reality, looking up at Lin Feng with a face full of pure despair as a blood-curdling scream filled the entire private room. He begged for mercy, promising to tell Lin Feng everything about Chun Inuo, but Lin Feng remained completely deaf to his pleas. He proceeded to crush the man's other arm. He asked Jingqiu if he truly thought he had the luxury of choosing whether to speak or not. Pale with agony, Jingqiu's voice began to tremble as he begged Lin Feng to let him go for the sake of their time as former classmates. The moment those words left his mouth, Lin Feng moved his foot to the man's knee and crushed it without hesitation. Jingqiu let out a piercing howl. The immense pain caused his features to contort and his eyes to roll back, nearly losing consciousness. Lin Feng gave him one cold look before landing a final blow to his chest. That final strike ended the man's life instantly. Once it was over, Lin Feng knelt down and placed his hand on the man's forehead to begin performing a soul-searching technique. A moment later, a faint green glow emerged from the body and was directly absorbed into Lin Feng's own form. Wang Chong stood by, completely frozen in shock. In all his 30 years, he had never seen anything so incomprehensible. It was a sight that shattered his entire worldview. Meanwhile, Lin Feng sifted through Jingqiu's memories, seeing the world through the dead man's eyes. He saw Chun Inuo leading a child. Perhaps he had held onto a sliver of hope before, but seeing the proof that she had a child left him feeling a profound sense of loss. After calming his emotions, he turned his gaze toward Wang Chong and asked what business had brought him here. Wang Chong looked at him with visible fear, his tone becoming incredibly respectful as he explained that something had gone wrong at his construction site. He explained that after hanging the charm Lin Feng provided, they found a dead weasel, but that very night, things took a turn for the bizarre. The unfinished buildings collapsed without cause, crushing 8 workers. But the truly terrifying part was that their corpses actually stood up on their own and walked into the mountains. Wang Chong considered himself a man who had seen much in his travels, but this level of evil left him chilled to the bone. He offered 5 million if the master could solve this nightmare for him. Lin Feng simply shook his head with a look of disdain. He asked the boss if he thought his services were really that cheap, suggesting that if he were serious, the price should be at least 100 times higher. Wang Chong's jaw dropped in disbelief at the mention of 500 million. Lin Feng merely nodded. Lin Feng told him that if he found the fee too high, he was welcome to find someone else. He stood up to leave, showing no interest in further debate. Wang Chong panicked. He had already invested billions into this project. If this trouble wasn't resolved, his fortune would vanish into thin air, and so he immediately blocked the way, begging the master to wait and agreeing to the price. He urged them to leave for the site immediately. Lin Feng gave a small smile. Surrounded by the boss's men, we see them leave the restaurant. Wang Chong made a quick call to have the body in the room handled, and then he ushered Lin Feng toward the car. But just then, a young woman suddenly rushed toward them, shouting for them to let her brother go because she had called the police. Lin Feng looked over to see Lin Yunyao holding her phone high, running toward him without a hint of fear. To be honest, her courage was quite impressive. He pulled her into a tight embrace, a rare warmth surging in his heart. He asked why she hadn't left as he told her. Yunyao clung to him nervously, explaining that she was simply too worried about where these people were taking him. He gently ruffled her hair and told her not to worry. After all, he was only going to help them handle a small matter. He assured her that in this world, no one existed who could actually hurt him. He then turned his gaze back to Wang Chong. He asked the boss to send his sister home, even joking that the fare could come out of his commission. Wang Chong bowed deeply. He insisted that such a thing wasn't necessary and immediately ordered his men to escort the master's sister home with the utmost care. Not long after, 2 bodyguards arrived to lead Lin Yunyao to a car. Only after seeing his sister safely inside did Lin Feng finally breathe a sigh of relief. He then told the boss that driving would be far too slow, so they would fly instead. Wang Chong froze, suddenly remembering the reports his subordinates had given him earlier. Naturally, a sense of dread began to wash over him, but before he could even react, Lin Feng gripped his shoulder firmly. Then, right before the eyes of the stunned bodyguards, they transformed into a streak of light and vanished into the sky. Just before they took flight, however, a beautiful woman, standing with a young girl, witnessed the entire scene of Lin Feng embracing Yunyao. Tears began to stream down her face. It was Chun Inuo. She whispered to herself that she had searched for him for 10 years, only to find him with another woman. She decided then and there that she would have nothing more to do with him. After saying those words, she turned and left. Meanwhile, Lin Feng was carrying Wang Chong through the air. In just a minute or two, they arrived at the haunted construction site. As soon as they landed, a chilling wind began to howl through the empty structures. The cold made Wang Chong's limbs feel heavy with fear. He stammered that they had arrived. Lin Feng nodded, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. Lin Feng immediately noticed that something was very wrong. He advised Boss Wang to stop the construction, noting that the feng shui here was abysmal. Wang Chong hurriedly wiped the cold sweat from his face, pleading that if he stopped now, he would lose billions of dollars. He begged the master to find another way. Lin Feng glanced at him, noting that the current price only covered dealing with the reanimated corpses. Changing the feng shui of this land was a different matter entirely, involving far too much karmic consequence for him to simply ignore. He told the boss that even for 50 billion, he wouldn't do it. He instructed Wang Chong to wait there, then vanished in a flash of movement. We see him reappear in the Taihu Mountains, the place where the corpses had fled. Using his divine sense to scan the area, he quickly located a cave emitting a chilling, ghostly wind. Not long after entering, he sensed a powerful barrier blocking his path further inside. Without a moment's hesitation, he raised his hand and shattered the barrier, reaching the depths of the cavern. To his surprise, he found a stone platform holding a small box radiating spiritual energy. He picked it up to examine it closely, and as it turned out, inside were 2 stones, one black and one white. He recognized them as the Yin-Yang twin stones, rare treasures for cultivation. But why were they here? He wondered if the owner of these treasures was the mastermind behind the corpses. He unceremoniously pocketed them and set the cave ablaze. Just as he was about to leave the burning cave, the sound of a woman's cry for help echoed from behind a wall. Frowning slightly, he shattered the stone wall to reveal a strange sight. There, tied up in a corner, was a young woman dressed in a bunny girl outfit. He stepped forward to remove the gag from her mouth, looking at her with genuine confusion. He asked who she was and why she was dressed like that. In the middle of a remote forest, the girl gasped for air, explaining that her name was Jiang Xining and she had been playing games. She recalled falling asleep suddenly and waking up in this cave. She asked if he was the hero her father had sent to rescue her. Lin Feng simply shook his head, telling her he was just passing through before turning to leave. However, he had only taken 2 steps when Jiang Xining called out to him, offering him money if he would take her with him. Hearing this, he stopped immediately and asked how much. Jiang Xining hesitated for a moment before explaining she was from the wealthy Jiang family. She promised him 10 million if he got her out. He was slightly taken aback by her wealth, but readily agreed to lead the way. Meanwhile, back at the construction site, a middle-aged man arrived. We see a man arrive accompanied by a dozen guards, their bodies shrouded in a faint, lingering aura of martial energy that commands immediate attention. Yang Tianbao looked at Wang Chong with a hint of surprise, asking what he was doing there. "You are Wang Chong from the Azure Dragon Sword Society, right?" He explained that his young lady had gone missing recently, and he had tracked her to the Taihu Mountains. Since Wang was already there, he ordered him to help with the search. Wang Chong suddenly had a thought. If they needed to find someone, he knew a master named Lin who possessed incredible, godlike powers. He claimed that calling Lin a divine immortal wouldn't be an exaggeration. With his help, they would surely find the girl, though his fees were a bit high. Wang Chong rubbed his fingers together with a hopeful smile, but Yang Tianbao only responded with a cold, mocking laugh. He called Wang a useless man who only succeeded because of women, doubting he could know any true master. To him, this Lin sounded like a common charlatan. He boasted that to mere ants, a martial artist of their caliber might seem divine, but it was all a matter of perspective. To be honest, his arrogance was quite palpable. His bodyguards joined in the mockery, bragging that Lord Yang was a powerful black-tier warrior capable of shattering mountains with his bare hands. They questioned why a Master Lin could find the girl when they couldn't, suggesting Wang had been fooled by a simple street magician's tricks. At that exact moment, Lin Feng returned with Jiang Xining. Hearing himself called a charlatan and a fraud, he couldn't help but release a flicker of killing intent. He remarked that a mere black-tier warrior dared to insult a predecessor. Even if he killed him on the spot, there would be no room for complaints. Jiang Xining spotted Yang Tianbao and immediately ran over to hug him, crying out that this big brother was the one who had rescued her. She mentioned her promise to pay him 10 million as a reward and urged Yang to transfer the money immediately. Yang Tianbao's expression shifted to one of shock. Looking at Lin Feng with utter disdain, he declared the $10 million reward void. He simply refused to believe the rescue was legitimate. He accused Lin Feng of being the villain who kidnapped the girl in the first place. Jiang Xining grew frantic, trying to step forward to defend her savior. But Yang Tianbao had his men pull her into the car, warning her that the world is a dangerous place. He intended to take this villain back to the Jiang family for interrogation. With a wave of his hand, he ordered his men to charge. These bodyguards radiated a murderous aura, clearly having taken many lives in the past. However, as they launched their coordinated attack, Lin Feng's figure suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving them striking at nothing but shadows. In an instant, the bodyguards were all sprawled on the ground, coughing up blood. Lin Feng offered a simple choice: pay the debt now so they could go their separate ways, or he would simply undo his rescue by finishing the girl off himself. It was a question of money or lives, and the choice was entirely theirs to make. A heavy silence fell over the construction site as everyone stared in absolute shock. Yang Tianbao, however, only let out a mocking sneer at the young man's boldness. He warned Lin Feng not to let a little strength go to his head, offering him one last chance to choose his words more carefully. To be honest, his arrogance was blinding. Lin Feng completely ignored the threat, calmly stating that they had exactly 10 seconds to decide. Once the time was up, he promised there would be no mercy. Yang Tianbao's expression turned icy, but just as he prepared to strike, a faint, rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance of the site. We see an old weasel with white-tipped fur slowly emerge from the shadows. This wasn't a normal animal. It walked with a strange, deliberate grace toward the crowd. The creature was nearly a meter long, its dark, intelligent eyes filled with a terrifyingly human-like cunning as it stared directly at the group. It asked if it looked more like a human or an immortal. This bizarre sight left everyone frozen in terror, though Lin Feng's expression remained perfectly calm. Wang Chong swallowed hard, realizing they were witnessing a weasel seeking a title. Jiang Xining felt a wave of tension, her heart racing at the supernatural encounter. Despite her nerves, she watched with a hint of curiosity. She told herself that with so many people and Yang Tianbao present, the situation would surely be handled. Yang Tianbao stood his ground by the car, his eyes sharp as he glared at the old weasel. To him, this was nothing more than a nuisance. He declared it was just a beast and nothing to fear. The old weasel seemed to notice Jiang Xining's gaze, offering her a twisted, eerie smile. It repeated its question to the young girl, asking if it looked human or divine. Suddenly, Yang Tianbao lost patience and launched a powerful punch at the creature. He shouted at it to stop its tricks, but the old weasel only gave a sinister cackle, effortlessly dodging the martial artist's heavy blow. Yang Tianbao's movements were cold and filled with killing intent, yet the weasel remained remarkably composed, barely shifting its body to avoid each strike. Wang Chong leaned in toward Lin Feng, nervously asking who the master thought would win. Lin Feng slowly turned his gaze toward the frantic battle. He noted that the old weasel had been merely playing from the very beginning, while the man from the Jiang family was already at his absolute limit. When asked who would win, Jiang Xining grew defensive and stepped out of the car, insisting that her uncle Yang was an expert in the Thunderbolt style. She boasted that his skills were legendary in Jinling City, but as she turned back to the fight, she saw the old weasel beginning to make its move. Facing the punch Yang Tianbao threw with all his might, the creature caught it with effortless ease before lunging directly at his chest. It tore a wound so deep the bone was visible, leaving Yang Tianbao gasping in pain as he scrambled back to create some distance. He tapped a few pressure points to stop the bleeding, a sight that made Wang Chong shudder. He nervously asked the master what they should do now. Lin Feng gave him a cold look, wondering why he was even asking. Naturally, they were going to stay right here and keep watching the show. If Yang Tianbao had simply paid the money at the start, Lin Feng might have helped for the sake of the fee. But some opportunities, once missed, are gone forever. Jiang Xining cried out in alarm and rushed over to support the wounded Yang Tianbao. It was then that the old weasel shifted its focus. Its emerald eyes locked onto Lin Feng, staring him down with unsettling intensity. It asked the young man if it looked more like a human or an immortal. Lin Feng frowned, annoyed that despite his lack of interference, the creature dared to target him. The weasel repeated its demand for an answer. Lin Feng let out a cold sneer, calling the creature a mere ant that didn't know its place. In a flash, his hand shot out with blinding speed. He seized the old weasel by the neck. The creature's expression turned to pure terror, but no matter how it struggled, it couldn't break free. With a slight application of force, Lin Feng snapped the creature's neck. In that instant, the entire construction site fell into a deathly silence. Everyone watched him in absolute shock. Lin Feng turned to Wang Chong, explaining that this weasel had been the one controlling the 8 workers' bodies. Now that the beast was dead, the project could proceed. Wang Chong finally snapped out of his daze and bowed deeply with newfound respect. He thanked the master profusely and immediately began working on his phone to process the promised payment. A notification soon arrived confirming the transfer of 500 million yuan. Satisfied, Lin Feng turned his gaze toward Jiang Xining and her group. He reminded them that they still owed him 10 million. Before Yang Tianbao could speak, Jiang Xining lashed out in a fit of anger. She demanded to know why, if he was strong enough to kill the beast, he hadn't stepped in sooner to save her uncle from such a heavy injury. Lin Feng looked at her with total indifference. He didn't owe them anything, and in his eyes, all living beings were merely ants. He warned her that no one in this world could default on a debt to Lin Feng. If she didn't pay, her life would be forfeit this very day. As the young lady of the Jiang family, she had never faced such a threat and stood frozen. Yang Tianbao, however, forced himself to stand up. Yang Tianbao admitted he had failed to recognize a true master and offered double the price if Lin Feng would escort them home. Lin Feng simply turned to Wang Chong. He asked if the Jiang family was truly wealthy. Wang Chong nodded, explaining that in Jinling City, they were a top-tier family with assets exceeding 1 trillion yuan. Hearing this, Lin Feng chuckled and turned his gaze back to Yang Tianbao, noting that he could indeed escort them back to safety. However, doubling the price wouldn't be enough. He demanded 1,000 times the original fee. A heavy silence immediately fell over the construction site. Yang Tianbao's pupils constricted as his face darkened. He asked the young man if he didn't think he was being a bit too greedy with such a demand. Lin Feng's tone remained flat as he replied that greed was a harsh word. He was simply setting a price for a service they desperately needed. It was a simple transaction. They could accept or refuse. Given the family's trillion yuan fortune, asking for a few dozen billion didn't seem excessive to him. Yang Tianbao cursed under his breath and turned to Jiang Xining, asking her to take the phone from his pocket and call the family for a helicopter. Lin Feng offered a friendly reminder from the sidelines, telling them not to forget to bring his money along with the rescue team. He warned them that if the money didn't appear, he would truly take a life. Jiang Xining glared at him before making the call. After a few brief words on the phone, she turned back to her uncle, assuring him that the family would arrive within half an hour. She promised his injuries would be treated soon. Yang Tianbao sighed in relief, though his eyes remained fixed on Lin Feng with lingering resentment. He mocked the boy, asking if he regretted his choice now that he had lost the chance to earn an extra 10 million yuan. He lectured Lin Feng on the dangers of greed, telling him he should have been content. Lin Feng was about to retort when something shifted. A figure radiating a chilling, sinister energy suddenly entered the range of his spiritual sense. We see a wrinkled, old man slowly approaching. His hair was snow-white and his body was so gaunt he hardly looked human, draped in an aura of death that felt suffocating. It was as if he had just crawled out of a coffin. The sight made everyone's skin crawl, but Yang Tianbao forced himself to ask who the stranger was. The old man ignored him, fixing his cloudy eyes on Lin Feng instead. He remarked that the world truly produced young heroes in every generation. He noted that someone so young had managed to kill both of the weasels he had raised, and deduced that the previous talisman was also Lin Feng's work. Lin Feng stared back expressionless and silent. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly before he offered a thin, cold smile, seemingly considering the boy's youth. The old man remarked that cultivation is no easy feat, and he could choose to spare Lin Feng's life and overlook the death of his two pets. However, he warned the boy to stop meddling in other people's business, reminding him there is always someone stronger, though Lin Feng only offered a disdainful smile. To be honest, Lin Feng was simply curious about the old man's goal, thinking it would be even better if he could squeeze some profit out of him. The old man shifted his gaze toward Yang Tianbao and Jiang Xining, introducing himself with a chilling rasp as the infamous blood-handed disciple, Yi Tianxin. He told the two juniors that if they were sensible, they would come with him quietly to save him the trouble of using force. Yang Tianbao's heart began to race. Jiang Xining looked at her uncle nervously, asking if this blood-handed disciple was truly that formidable. Yang Tianbao could only nod in grim confirmation. He explained that 20 years ago, this man was one of the most notorious figures in the martial arts world of Jiangnan province. He practiced an evil technique known as the blood-sucking method, killing and draining victims to increase his own internal power. It was a gruesome business, naturally. In just 1 year, over 1,000 people fell by his hand, and even the Earth-rank masters sent by the Martial Arts Alliance failed to capture him. Hearing this description, the group felt their skin crawl, yet Lin Feng watched with genuine interest. To him, the man was little more than an ant. Deep down, he knew that no matter how strong this villain claimed to be, he could be crushed in an instant. Yang Tianbao swallowed hard and spoke up. He suggested that if the Jiang family had ever offended the senior, he could apologize on their behalf. The blood-handed disciple let out a shrill, mocking laugh. He clarified that the Jiang family hadn't offended him personally, but they had certainly made enemies of others. Yang Tianbao's heart sank at those words. He immediately thought of the Qin family, their greatest rival among the four great clans. A forced, trembling smile appeared on Yang Tianbao's face. He asked if it was the Qin family who had sent him. The old man gave a sharp laugh, noting that since they wouldn't come willingly, they would have to die. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward, his large hand clamping firmly around Yang Tianbao's throat. It seemed the end was near. However, at that exact moment, the roar of an engine echoed through the sky. Everyone instinctively looked up toward the horizon. We see a helicopter fast approaching through the night sky. Jiang Xining waved her arms in joy, realizing the family's rescue team had finally arrived. The blood-handed disciple released Yang Tianbao, his expression darkening as he watched the sky before vanishing into the vast darkness of the night. Lin Feng watched the direction the villain had fled, but decided it was more important to collect his payment first. Priorities, after all. He decided to get his hands on the payment first before settling the score with the blood-handed disciple. With a flick of his finger, a wisp of spiritual energy attached itself to the villain. This way, no matter where the blood-handed disciple fled, Lin Feng would be able to track him down. The others, meanwhile, were left completely stunned by how quickly the old man had vanished. To be honest, they looked a bit dazed. Soon enough, the helicopter descended slowly before their eyes, landing right in the middle of the clearing. Under the watchful gaze of the group, 7 people stepped off the helicopter. At their head were a man and a woman. The man, dressed in white, had handsome features and a truly refined air. The woman beside him wore a long black dress, her face framed by delicate willow leaf eyebrows and light makeup that accentuated her elegance. Her features were so exquisite they seemed to have stepped out of a painting. Upon seeing this woman in black, Lin Feng, who had been perfectly calm, suddenly froze in his tracks. He stood there, rooted to the spot, as if he had seen a ghost from his past. While he watched with a cold, internal smile, Jiang Xining ran forward excitedly and threw herself into the arms of the man in white, crying out, "Brother, why are you here?" The man in white rubbed her head affectionately, asking how he could possibly stay away after such a major incident. Normally, Lin Feng wouldn't care about this man's identity, but seeing Chun Yinhua leaning so closely against him caused a wave of complex emotions to wash over Lin Feng's heart. He quietly asked Wang Chong who the man was. Wang Chong withdrew his gaze and took a respectful step back toward Lin Feng's side. He explained that this man was Jiang Junlin, the direct heir of the Jiang family. He was the man destined to control the entire Jiang family in the future. Although Wang Chong was the leader of the Azure Dragon Gang and a chairman, he knew his place. When facing someone like Jiang Junlin, he could only bow his head in submission. Lin Feng murmured the name to himself, tasting the bitterness of it. He then asked if the woman in the black dress was Junlin's wife. Wang Chong shook his head, clarifying that she wasn't his wife, but rather his fiancée. As far as Wang Chong knew, Jiang Junlin hadn't married yet. Hearing this, Lin Feng was internally shocked. He knew Yinhua had clearly been married and had a daughter. How could she suddenly be Junlin's fiancée? He wondered if she had gotten a divorce, but his train of thought was interrupted. Just as he was lost in these confusing thoughts, Jiang Junlin approached him with a calm, authoritative demeanor. He presented a card, stating there were 20 million inside as a formal apology from the Jiang family for the trouble caused. He stepped forward slowly, pulling a gold card from his pocket and handing it to Lin Feng before turning his attention toward Wang Chong. He acknowledged Wang Chong, noting that the Azure Dragon Construction Group had a good reputation and suggesting there might be a chance for them to cooperate with the Jiang family. Wang Chong felt utterly flattered, a wide smile spreading across his face as he thanked the young master. But Jiang Xining wasn't nearly as pleased, grabbing Jiang Junlin's arm in a huff. She demanded to know why her brother was giving money to a man who had simply watched while she was in danger. Jiang Junlin frowned, looking at her with a stern gaze. He reminded her that without this young man, she might not be alive at all. He pointed out that Lin Feng had no obligation to save her and questioned how he had raised her. He told her she must learn gratitude and stop being so self-centered, as no one owes her anything. At this, Xining simply pouted and shot Lin Feng a sharp glare. Jiang Junlin then turned back to Lin Feng, lowering his posture with genuine humility as he urged him to accept the money. Lin Feng, however, just stared at the bank card. He didn't say a word. To be honest, Junlin's humble attitude was quite impressive for a man of his high status, showing exactly why he was considered such an elite heir. But the fact remained that this man was Yinhua's fiancé. Lin Feng wondered what it would mean to take money from him, especially since Junlin's elegance felt a bit like a mask. He felt as though he were looking at a polished facade. Thinking of this, he shifted his gaze toward Chun Yinhua, though he found himself completely at a loss for words. Chun Yinhua was watching him as well, but her expression was the polar opposite of his. Her eyes were filled with cold indifference, and a mocking smile played on her lips. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. This silent exchange was immediately noticed by everyone present, and Wang Chong suddenly remembered the question Lin Feng had just asked. The realization made his skin crawl. He worried that if this powerful master had actually fallen for Jiang Junlin's fiancée, a catastrophic conflict was surely on the horizon. Jiang Junlin then formally introduced Chun Yinhua as his fiancée. His voice was steady, but it carried a subtle weight, as if he were politely reminding Lin Feng of his place. It was a warning not to reach for things far above his station. Lin Feng's expression remained flat, his voice devoid of any emotion as he asked if that was really the case. He then dropped a bombshell, telling the young master there was something he didn't know. This fiancée was actually Lin Feng's former girlfriend. Junlin's face instantly stiffened. Wang Chong and Xining stood there with their mouths hanging open in pure shock. Lin Feng looked directly at Chun Inua and let out a slow, heavy breath. He told her it had been a long time. Chun Inua stepped forward, her tone perfectly calm as she noted that yes, it had been 10 whole years. Looking at her cold, distant face, Lin Feng felt a sharp, agonizing pain blooming deep within his heart. She pulled her hand away, her expression turning icy as she asked if he had lost his mind. She told him to stop being disgusting, which prompted Jiang Junlin to step in. His voice turned cold as he told Lin Feng that regardless of their past, she was his fiancée now. He warned the young man to show some respect and keep his hands to himself. He threatened that he wouldn't be so polite if Lin Feng crossed the line again. However, Lin Feng ignored him entirely, his eyes remaining fixed on Chun Inua. Inua could only let out a helpless sigh. Lin Feng tried to explain that 10 years ago, on the way to her house, an accident had occurred that changed everything. He wanted her to know he had never forgotten her, but Inua coldly cut him off. She told him to stop, as she had no interest in his stories or his life. She insisted that the past should stay in the past, claiming her life was fine now and asking him not to disturb her. Hearing this, Lin Feng clenched his fists. 1,000 words were trapped in his chest. He realized that even if he explained every detail of those lost years, she might never truly forgive him. After a long silence, he could only manage to whisper a sincere apology. Seeing his pained expression, Inua was reminded of the scene at the restaurant the day before. At that moment, her heart had already turned to stone. It was then that she finally accepted Jiang Junlin's persistent and tireless pursuit. And so, we arrive at the present situation. Her face was now a mask of mockery, as she looked at the man she believed to be a hypocrite. To be honest, she felt foolish for waiting 10 long years for him. She gave him one last look before shifting her gaze back to Jiang Junlin. She told Junlin it was time to go, then walked toward the black SUV parked by the roadside without looking back. The others followed closely behind her. Once everyone else had settled into the car, Jiang Junlin turned back to give Lin Feng one final, triumphant smile. He noted that Inua's stance was quite clear. He mocked Lin Feng for failing to cherish her when he had the chance, promising that he would be the one to shower her with affection now. But there was more. He revealed that Inua was actually the legitimate daughter of the powerful Chun family in Yinchuan. He asked if Lin Feng even understood what that name implied. Lin Feng frowned, realizing he knew very little about Inua's family background. Whenever he had asked in the past, she had always found a way to change the subject. He looked at Junlin with a cold, piercing gaze, asking if he was only marrying her for her status. Jiang Junlin simply offered a thin, knowing smile. He asked, "What if I am?" with total indifference. At that moment, Lin Feng's killing intent became nearly impossible to suppress. He issued a dark warning. He promised that if Inua suffered even the slightest grievance, Junlin would die, and the entire Jiang family would be buried alongside him. Junlin just laughed. He didn't seem to take the threat seriously at all, as if the words of a commoner couldn't possibly touch a man of his standing. He told Lin Feng to use the money to buy back his lost youth, casually tossing the $20 million bank card onto the ground before vanishing into the SUV. As the car disappeared into the night, Lin Feng stood alone, his mind a chaotic swirl of emotions and a hollow sense of emptiness in his heart. Wang Chong watched him and shook his head sadly. He stepped forward to offer some comfort, urging the master not to take the rejection so hard. With his status, what kind of woman couldn't he find? Lin Feng slowly closed his eyes, and when he opened them, his gaze had returned to its former clarity. He didn't even acknowledge Wang Chong, vanishing into the night with a few quick movements. Meanwhile, inside the SUV on the mountain road, the atmosphere was heavy. Jiang Junlin sat in the passenger seat, his fingers lightly tapping against the window frame with a faint, rhythmic clicking sound. Inua spoke with a cold tone, telling him that if he wanted to get angry, he should just do it instead of holding it in. Junlin only smiled warmly at her. He claimed she had misunderstood him, asking how he could ever bear to be angry with her. Inua simply curled her lip, unimpressed by his display. She told him he was right. Her daughter was indeed Lin Feng's child. She added that if he minded, she would move out of the Jiang house that very night. Junlin urged her never to say such things again, insisting that he loved her for who she was. As for Lianlian's father, he claimed he didn't care at all. Inua turned her head to look out the window, her cold face filled with a complex swirl of emotions. She had to admit something to herself. She recognized that Jiang Junlin was, on paper, a perfect man. He didn't care about her past and treated her incredibly well. Yet, she felt no spark for him. With a look of total sincerity, Junlin suddenly let out a subtle sigh, remarking that since the past was over, she should try to move on. He claimed he wasn't one to gossip, but suggested that Lin Feng was likely not a simple man. Even he couldn't see through the depths of Lin Feng's strength. He warned that Lin Feng's return likely had some ulterior motive. After hearing this, Inua's expression shifted, clearly unsettled by the suggestion. Her mind began to race with dark possibilities. Lin Feng had been gone for 10 years. Why would he suddenly reappear now of all times? She wondered if he had discovered her true identity and planned to use her to get close to the Qin family. The very thought caused her immense pain. Seeing her distressed expression, a triumphant smile tugged at the corner of Junlin's mouth. He then mentioned he had found a miraculous doctor. He claimed there was hope to cure Lianlian's condition, but warned her not to let Lin Feng know, lest he use the child to threaten her. Inua nodded and thanked him. Meanwhile, we follow Lin Feng as he tracked the trail of the bloody-handed butcher, Yi Tianxin, deep into the mountains. Our protagonist reached the Taihu mountain range. When his divine sense finally locked onto the target, the man was sitting before a large tree, adjusting his breathing. Upon closer inspection, Lin Feng noticed something strange about the man's body. It seemed he had been practicing some sort of demonic art. Though he had the strength of a martial master, his life force had dwindled to that of a centenarian. Of course, Lin Feng didn't care enough to interfere. Yi Tianxin seemed to sense someone approaching and instantly tensed up, but when he realized it was Lin Feng, he let out a long breath. He let out a sinister laugh, admitting he thought the Zhang family had caught up to him. To be honest, he didn't expect a young man like Lin Feng. Lin Feng tilted his head, his voice remaining calm as he mentioned finding the yin-yang stones in the cave earlier. He demanded the rest of them. He offered to spare the man's life, but Yi Tianxin's eyes widened with a sudden, unmasked, murderous intent. He had assumed Yang Tianbao took them. He figured if the Zhang family sent reinforcements, he'd be finished, but finding the stones with Lin Feng changed things. Since he knew too much, he had to die. With those words, Yi Tianxin lunged forward, his feet slamming against the ground as he propelled himself toward our protagonist with lethal speed. His hand curved into a claw, aiming straight for Lin Feng's throat. However, Lin Feng simply waved a hand at him with total indifference. Before the butcher could react, a massive force struck his abdomen, sending him flying backward until he crashed violently against a tree trunk. He struggled to crawl back up, his eyes now filled with pure terror. He recognized the move as the legendary external release of inner energy. As a late-stage Earthrealm master, he couldn't even withstand a single blow. He desperately asked who Lin Feng truly was, his voice trembling. At that moment, Yi Tianxin felt a chill run through his entire body. Even in his own mind, he didn't dare to be arrogant after being so easily broken. Lin Feng walked forward, his expression cold and unchanging. He demanded the yin-yang stones again, noting this was an order, not a request. He told the man to consider carefully how many more of those strikes he could survive. In truth, Lin Feng didn't care much about the stones themselves. The events at the construction site had weighed heavily on him, and he simply needed someone to vent his frustrations on, which, unfortunately, was Yi Tianxin. The butcher was now paralyzed with fear. As Lin Feng drew closer, the man's legs gave out, and he fell to his knees, begging for mercy. He knocked his head against the ground repeatedly, promising to be Lin Feng's dog if spared, but he swore he truly had no more stones left. Lin Feng stopped and looked down at him. Seeing how quickly the man had accepted his situation, he offered to spare him in exchange for answers. Yi Tianxin nodded frantically, thanking his senior and promising to tell him everything he wanted to know without holding back a single detail. Lin Feng nodded with a hint of satisfaction. He knew that while men like this were far from good, they were often the ones who survived the longest. He asked why the butcher had targeted that specific construction site. Yi Tianxin's voice shook with panic as he began to explain that it was because of the site. He claimed the construction noise was simply too loud and annoyed him, so he caused some trouble in the shadows. He insisted he had no other malicious intent, leaving Lin Feng speechless. Lin Feng shook his head, asking who ordered the kidnapping of Jiang Ximing. Yi Tianxin confessed it was Qin Tianzhu of the Qin family, and that was where he obtained the stones. Our protagonist nodded, then asked why he needed the yin-yang stones so badly. Yi Tianxin hesitated for a moment before letting out a heavy, weary sigh. He explained that the technique he practiced was called the Great Blood-Sucking Method, which allowed him to raise his martial realm by consuming human blood. However, this dark art had a severe drawback. It corrupted his own bloodline and drained his life essence. He had once been advised by a mysterious master on how to fix it. The master told him that using the yin-yang stones to temper his body could eliminate these side effects. That was why he had approached the Qin family to demand them. Hearing this, Lin Feng rubbed his chin in thought. He told the man to lure Qin Tianzhu out, promising that once the stones were in hand, Yi Tianxin could leave. Without a moment's hesitation, Yi Tianxin called Qin Tianzhu. When the call connected, he spoke in a sinister tone, playing his part perfectly. He claimed to have captured the target at Taihu Mountain and suggested they meet for the trade. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. The man agreed immediately, saying he was on his way. Half an hour later, the sound of light footsteps began to echo through the quiet mountain forest. We see a middle-aged man in gray robes rushing toward them with incredible speed. This, as we soon learn, was the man they were waiting for, Qin Tianzhu. He approached and scanned the surroundings. When his eyes landed on Lin Feng, he frowned slightly, but he didn't seem to consider the young man a threat. He demanded to know where the prisoner was. Yi Tianxin didn't answer immediately, instead asking if he had brought the yin-yang stones as promised. Qin Tianzhu nodded and pulled a small wooden box from his waist pouch. Inside were two small, differently colored stones representing extreme yin and extreme yang. A look of pure greed flashed in Yi Tianxin's eyes. Qin Tianzhu noticed this, but his expression remained cold and unchanged as he let out a soft, mocking laugh. He told Yi Tianxin that he knew there was no prisoner. He accused the butcher of simply trying to lure him out to steal the stones for himself. He asked if the butcher really thought he couldn't see through such a transparent trick. Startled, Yi Tianxin asked why he had come if he already knew the truth. Qin Tianzhu explained that relying on someone like Yi Tianxin was a waste of time. Furthermore, since the butcher knew too many Qin family secrets, he had to be dealt with. He clapped his hands, and an elderly man in flowing robes emerged from the depths of the forest. He greeted Yi Tianxin, noting it had been a long time. Yi Tianxin's pupils dilated in shock as he recognized the newcomer as Qin Kuan. In that moment of terror, he realized just how much trouble he was in. Deep down, Yi Tianxin felt a strange sense of relief. Even if he hadn't lured Qin Tianzhu here today, the family would have eventually found a way to eliminate him anyway. With Lin Feng by his side, Yi Tianxin leaned in with a flattering smile and bowed his head respectfully, identifying the newcomer as a man named Qin Kuan. He explained that Qin Kuan was a master from the previous generation of the Qin family, likely at the peak of the Earth realm, but Lin Feng merely nodded without much reaction. Seeing this display of submission, Qin Kuan and Qin Tianzhu both narrowed their eyes in confusion, wondering why the infamous blood-handed butcher was acting so subservient. They couldn't understand why he was being so respectful to such a young man, so they began to study our protagonist closely to gauge his strength. However, no matter how hard they looked, they couldn't perceive his cultivation level and assumed he was just an ordinary person, leading Qin Tianzhu to let out a disdainful sneer. He mocked Yi Tianxin, telling him he must be getting senile to bow and scrape before a mere brat, which caused the butcher to laugh out loud in return. Yi Tianxin called them frogs in a well who could only see a patch of sky. Lin Feng knew the butcher was just hiding behind his shadow, but he didn't mind. He gave Yi Tianxin a brief, indifferent glance before turning his attention toward the two men from the Qin family, stating he had no time for idle chatter. He demanded they hand over the Yinyang stones so they could leave, but Qin Tianzhu only laughed, asking what kind of fool would make such a demand. He claimed that even the current alliance leader wouldn't dare speak to him that way, advising Lin Feng to kneel and beg for mercy before the Qin family's wrath fell upon him. Lin Feng simply shook his head as his figure vanished instantly, reappearing directly in front of Qin Tianzhu a second later with his hand outstretched. He seized the man by the throat so quickly that Qin Tianzhu's eyes widened in shock, unable to make even a single sound as he was lifted off the ground. With a casual movement, Lin Feng took the small wooden box containing the yin-yang stones from the man's person and then tossed him aside like a piece of trash. Qin Tianzhu slammed into a large tree and began gasping for air, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he struggled to regain his breath after the sudden assault. Watching this, Yi Tianxin felt incredibly fortunate that he had chosen the right side, while Qin Kuan's expression changed instantly as he rushed to his companion's side. He helped the man up, asking if he was all right, while Qin Tianzhu glared at Lin Feng with a look of pure, unadulterated malice. Though he was wary of what had just happened, he wasn't truly afraid, believing that Lin Feng had only succeeded by using a fast movement technique to catch him off guard. He told himself that as long as he was prepared, there would be no more openings, demanding to know who this stranger was that dared to help a butcher rob the Qin family. He asked if the young man realized the magnitude of the trouble he had caused, but Lin Feng simply tucked the wooden box away with a calm, indifferent expression. Lin Feng gave him a brief look, asking if the Qin family was really that formidable compared to the Jiangs, which made Qin Tianzhu realize he must be here for revenge. He assumed the Jiang family had sent him, but Lin Feng simply shook his head, stating that in this world, no one has the power to command him. Relieved by this answer, Qin Tianzhu let out a breath and signaled to Qin Kuan. Understanding the silent command, the two of them moved quickly to take their positions. They surrounded our protagonist from the front and back, as Qin Tianzhu wiped the blood from his mouth and noted coldly that he was now fully prepared. He claimed Lin Feng's movement techniques would be useless now, while Qin Kuan sneered, admitting the boy had talent but was still far too arrogant. He reminded him that there is always a higher heaven and the Qin family wasn't to be trifled with, yet Lin Feng merely gave a casual wave of his hand. Suddenly, both men were sent flying by an invisible force, crashing into the ground with enough impact to leave a crater, while Yi Tianxin watched in awe. The butcher swallowed hard, realizing that if he hadn't surrendered earlier, he would be the one lying in that pit right now. Inside the crater, Qin Tianzhu and Qin Kuan were covered in bruises and scars, helping each other up as they looked at Lin Feng with eyes full of terror. They realized he could project his internal energy outward, marking him as a master of the heaven realm, a level where everyone below is considered mere ants. If they dared to resist further, he could crush them as easily as flicking a finger, a sight that made Yi Tianxin burst into a fit of triumphant laughter. He mocked Qin Tianzhu for finally meeting his match, earning a look of pure, murderous intent from the injured man that he could barely suppress. Lin Feng ignored their bickering entirely, simply tucking away the box containing the yin-yang stones before turning to make his departure. Before he could get far, Yi Tianxin's voice called out from behind, begging the senior to wait for him, while on the other side, Qin Tianzhu watched them go. Once they were gone, Qin Tianzhu finally lost his temper, punching a nearby tree trunk in frustration over their terrible luck. He lamented that if they had known a master was coming for the stones, they should have just given them as a gift to earn his favor instead. Qin Kuan nodded in helpless agreement, noting that the Jiang family had recently formed an alliance with the powerful Qin family of Yinchuan. The Qins were one of the most formidable forces in the region, boasting more than 5 Heaven Realm masters within their ranks. He warned that if they didn't find a solution soon, the Qin family would be wiped out the moment the Jiang and Qin families were united by marriage. Qin Tianzhu sighed deeply, admitting that kidnapping Jiang Xingning had been their only desperate hope for leverage against the Jiang family's rise. Qin Kuan stood in silence for a moment, still reeling from Yi Tianxin's betrayal, before a sudden realization struck him regarding the Jiang family. We learned that the alliance with the Qins was only possible because their daughter, Chun Yinhua, had a child out of wedlock who suffered from a rare disease. The Jiangs had found a miracle doctor to treat the girl, securing Yinhua's hand in marriage, but Qin Kuan saw a way to change the game. He remembered that the legendary physician Sai Huadawa owed their family a favor, and if they could convince him to intervene, everything might shift. If they could pull the Qin family to their side, the Jiangs would be no threat, and if that failed, they could simply eliminate Chen Yinhua. Meanwhile, Lin Feng heard Yi Tianxin's voice behind him and turned around, a flicker of genuine displeasure crossing his face. He demanded to know why the man was following him, warning that he wouldn't be so polite if it continued, before turning to leave once more. He didn't give him a single chance to explain, which, to be honest, was quite typical of him, but Yi Tianxin gritted his teeth and followed anyway. The moment the word senior left the butcher's mouth, Lin Feng spun around and gripped him by the throat with lightning speed. He asked coldly if his previous warning had been unclear, while Yi Tianxin, his face turning a deep red, gasped out that he wanted to make a deal. Lin Feng raised an eyebrow and tossed him to the ground like a piece of unwanted luggage, wondering what such a man could possibly offer him. Yi Tianxin scrambled up, gasping for air, and noted that at Lin Feng's current level, even the yin-yang stones wouldn't provide much of a boost. He confessed that without those very stones, he likely wouldn't survive another 3 months, a desperate situation, to say the least. Lin Feng countered that his life held no value in his eyes, but Yi Tianxin seemed to have expected this, and began to sell his services aggressively. He admitted he was nothing to a master, yet insisted that in the mundane world, he was a top-tier figure with invaluable connections. He knew every major power in the Jiang and martial arts world, and the fact that the martial alliance couldn't catch him was proof of his worth. This made Lin Feng pause. He had only just returned to this world, and lacked subordinates to handle the more tedious tasks of life. Having an Earth Realm martial artist like Yi Tianxin to deal with trivial matters wasn't a bad idea, and the butcher sensed his hesitation. He immediately pressed his forehead to the ground, begging the senior to take him in and let him handle all the inconvenient business ahead.